Capitulum XXVI, Daedalus et Icarus. Lecture 7, versus centesimus tricesimus usque adversum centesimum quadragesimum quintum. Ego non minus delector, narrando illas fabulas, non modo quod ipse per se pulcherime esse mihi videntur, sed etiam quia exitus fabularum homines temerarios optime monent. I am not less pleased in by narrating those stories. Recall that Quintus was saying how pleased he was in listening to such stories. Not only, but also, non modo sed etiam. Not only because this, but also because that. Not only because they themselves, see the nominative in ipse, seem to me to be, mihi videntur esse, they seem to me to be pulcherime, extremely beautiful, the superlative degree of the adjective, per se, in and of themselves. So regardless of their message, they're just nice stories. But also because the outcomes, the endings, exitus, notice the macron over the u, we have a fourth declension nominative plural. The outcomes of the stories warn, monent, rash persons, homines temerarios, folks who are not cautious. They warn them in the best way, optime, an adverb. So going back to the top, non minus, not less, delector, passive voice, present tense, videntur, passive voice, present tense, monent, active voice, present tense. Talis enim est hominum natura, et quidem maxime puerorum. For such is the nature of human beings. And indeed, especially, maxime, of boys. That is, they are inclined to be temerarii. Non solum delectandi causa, verum etiam monendi causa, narrator fabula de filio Daedali. Nam quod illi puero accidet, idem omni puero accidere poterit, nisi patris suo paret. Again, coordination between the first two lines. Not only this, but also that. Non solum verum etiam. Not only for the sake of giving pleasure, but also for the sake of warning. Delectandi and monendi are gerunds in the genitive case. And this is a new construction here. Notice the arrangement of the words. The gerund in the genitive, followed by causa in the ablative. If you want to read some more about this construction, you can see Gildersleeve and Lodge. The causa is mentioned at number 408 under the ablative of cause, but more particularly this construction is discussed at Gildersleeve and Lodge number 373, the genitive with prepositional substantives. So it's almost like causa is functioning as a preposition here. It's a regular expression, and indeed there are several words that are used in this way. Causa in the ablative, gratia in the ablative, ergo in that's not declinable, and instar are all construed with the genitive, that is, when they're used in this way. Another thing to note there is that causa and gratia, for the sake of the thing in the genitive, commonly follow the genitive in classical Latin, and also in the jurists, Gildersleeve and Lodge say. In Livy and later, they often precede. So the takeaway for us is that they should follow an imitation of what happens in the classical period, but it's not impossible to see them come before the genitive either. And we'll translate them again as for the sake of the genitive. Not only for the sake of giving pleasure, but also for the purpose of warning. Ørberg has a nice way of glossing this. He says, quare narrator fabula, and he puts quare into italics. Why is the story being told? And this is the answer to that sort of question. Monendi causa narrator. For the sake of warning, the story is told. Narrator fabula. The story is told, narrator fabula, de filio Daedali, about the son of Daedalus. Nam quod illi puero accitet, for that which, recall that Latin can begin a sentence or a clause with just the relative pronoun without a leading demonstrative, for that which happened to that boy, illi puero in the dative case, accidit in the perfect tense, the same thing, idem, no macron over the I, idem, which would be the masculine, but idem here, the neuter, nominative and accusative singular. Here it's in blue, it's the nominative. The same thing will be able, poteret, to happen to every boy, again dative, unless nisi paret patri suo, unless he obeys his father. Paret takes the dative case. Noli icarum imitari mi quinte, semper cautus esto, verum haud necessa est te a me moneri, post id quod heri tibi accidit. Do not imitate Icarus, my Quintus. Always be cautious. But it is not at all necessary that you are warned by me after that which happened to you yesterday. Noli, again a negative command. Do not do that infinitive. Icarum, the direct object of imitari. Mi quinte, in the vocative case. Semper, always. And then that adjective, cautus aum, cautious. And our second imperative form, again, that we saw earlier in this chapter. Basically the equivalent of as. The first imperative form that we saw long ago in an earlier chapter in Ørberg. But here, perhaps the second imperative is used to emphasize a kind of piece of advice or law even that holds good for the future indefinitely. But it is not at all necessary. Notice the accusative with infinitive construction is being used following necesse est. It is not at all necessary that you are warned by me, which doesn't sound perhaps very nice in English, but I just want you to be able to see what the construction is there. After that which. So here we have an id. We do have a leading demonstrative, unlike the previous slide in which there was no leading demonstrative before the quad, before that relative pronoun. After that which happened to you yesterday. Certe, ille casus tuus melius te monet quam ulla fabula. Certainly, that fall of yours warns you, admonishes you better. If we could say betterly, we would, but it's an adverb and we don't say that, we say better. Admonishes you better than, comparative, working with melius, than any story, understand, admonishes you, monet te. His verbis puero monito sira tandem narandi finem facet. After the boy has been advised, warned, admonished with these words, Sira finally makes an end of storytelling. Puero monito, an ablative absolute. Very important to notice the tense of the participle in the ablative absolute. It's the perfect tense. So we want to locate that idea prior to the time of the main verb. The main verb here is facet. You can see there in red. Makes an end in the present time, so we can translate monito. It's perfect tense participle. No problem here. It'll also be perfect tense if we use a finite verb in English to translate it. And we can throw in a word like after to help bring out that relationship between the ablative absolute and the main sentence even more. After the boy has been warned by these words, ablative his verbis, Sira finally finishes storytelling. You see the idiom here, makes an end of the gerund. That is, of the verbal idea put into the gerund, makes an end of storytelling. Neque quintus eam abeuntem revocat, sed in lecto recumbit oculosque claudit. But, maybe we'll say for neque rather than and, though we could do that too, but Quintus does not call her back even though she is going away. But, so maybe with the present of the but in the next line, then we'll say and the first time. So there's not too many buts beginning our clauses. But lies back in his bed and closes his eyes. Notice the present participle in abeuntem, agreeing with eam. Here perhaps we can say that this participle is happening, or that the action of the main verb is, I guess, happening or not happening in spite of the fact of the participle, right? Earlier when she had tried to get away, Quintus calls her back, stay with me, tell me more stories, and so forth. So here we can take that circumstance and express it as the situation in spite of it. In spite of the fact that she's going away, he does not call her back, but he lies back, recumbere, reclines in his bed and closes his eyes. Mox puer insomnis, sibi videtur, alis ornatus, transmontes et flumina volare. Soon the boy seems to himself, appears to himself, thinks that he is, as Ørberg suggests with his gloss, thinks that he is decked out with wings, flying across mountains and rivers. Where or when? In his dreams, in somnis. In his dreams. Soon the boy thinks that he is, in his dreams, flying across mountains and rivers, ornatus, nominative with puer. So the construction, we have videtur. It seems to himself that he is doing that infinitive. He seems, to whom, not to me or to you, he seems to be flying. We'd have that construction, wouldn't give us any trouble, but then with the sibi, it's something slightly different than we'd seen before. He appears to himself to be flying across mountains and rivers, ornatus avis, adorned with wings.